treatments for malaria. Before then, say Europeans' economic contact with sub-Saharan Africa was centered around the slave trade. So it wasn't occupying Africa, it was sort of extracting Africa's most precious resource, its people, and brutally taking them to the New World. So we can't understand those broad patterns if we don't understand the barrier that tropical disease probably played to outsiders entering Africa. So there could be really profound consequences of tropical disease in sub-Saharan Africa. We're going to talk a little bit more about that today. So I'm going to circle back to health in a second. Actually, let me go back to the last slide. Let me just ask if there's any questions or comments on malaria, on tropical disease. We are going to come back to it in about 20 minutes and go into more detail. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's often discussed that the very high disease burden, anywhere in the world, but sub-Saharan Africa has the worst disease burden, that a very high disease burden can impose those kinds of psychic costs on people or have cultural effects. And I think there's definitely something to it. And what ends up happening in places where you face such a terrible disease like malaria that can be debilitating or can kill your children, et cetera, is I think sometimes people get very focused on that disease, and dealing with, say, non-fatal diseases that could affect you just seems like so much less of a priority. In some ways, it is much less of a priority, but I think it affects health-seeking behavior, more broadly. Anything compared to malaria or HIV or tuberculosis, these like terrible killers, everything else seems like small potatoes. Even things you can do to improve your health just may not seem worthwhile relative when you're facing this terrible threat. So that's something that's often discussed. So that's a good question. Any other comments or thoughts about health and the role of health as Bloom and Sachs laid out? Okay, let's turn to transport costs. That was their third main explanation. Of course, transport costs are very important in thinking about economic development because when there are very high transport costs, it's hard to trade. So if I produce something that the world wants, but I can't get it to the world, well, then I can't buy what the world is producing either. So the ability to sell your products, the ability to ship others' products in becomes essential. And historically, the kind of options in terms of transport were much more limited. Historically, the way you transported things efficiently before the railroad was really by water. Overland transport before the railroad was just incredibly costly. So there's some historians that have tried to figure out what the costs were internationally to ship something an equivalent distance by land and by sea. And the claim is shipping something by land was about 15 times more expensive. There were no superhighways 200 years ago. You had a horse and a cart, and there was some dirt path, and it was very trying. So shipping by sea was important. So access to the sea and access to rivers was really central. It's no coincidence that a lot of the historically developed areas, the historically prosperous areas, were ports. That is not a coincidence. It's because those are the areas that could trade easily. If you were inland, it became incredible, and you didn't have access to a river, it was just impossibly costly to trade with the rest of the world. So how does Africa's geography matter here? Well, it turns out if you look at the ratio of coastline in miles or in kilometers to land area, it's actually very different in different parts of the world. So in sub-Saharan Africa, that ratio is about 1 to 1. Now that ratio per se doesn't mean anything, but I think it means something relative to the other regions. In South Asia, it's about 2.5 to 1. In Western Europe, it's 15 to 1. Okay, so let's just look at the map. What would be a situation where you would have a lot of land area? Let me use the pen. What would be a situation where you would have a lot of land area relative to coastline, or let's say a lot of coastline to land area? If your coastline, no, we've almost got it figured out here, guys. There we go. If your coastline, let me draw two different coastlines. This is coastline. This is an island, a crazy island. Okay, this is one. Now imagine we have the same land area in something that looks like a rectangle. Which of these has more coastline per land area? The crazy islands, right? Because there's just so much coastline. There's so many places you can land relative to land area. So having really jagged patterns and lots of peninsulas and isthmuses and bays, all that is great because it just creates all these potential landing points for ships and trade. If you look like a big block, then there's just this whole region in the middle that's sort of far from the coast. But there are very few such areas in the crazy island. So what does the world look like? If you look at Europe, and actually here it would be good to zoom in a little bit. I think I can. Let's do it. Yay. If you look at Europe, Europe is like the land of peninsulas, the Iberian Peninsula, the Italian Peninsula, the Greek Peninsula, Britain, Scandinavia, just jagged coastline. So trade is relatively easy. There aren't too many parts of Europe that are very far from the coast. Yeah, there's Switzerland and whatnot, but not too much. There's the Black Sea, the Mediterranean, it's just tremendous amount of land area. When we go to sub-Saharan Africa, there's huge areas in the middle of Central Africa that are just like thousands of kilometers away from the coast that are really isolated from trade. So fundamentally, the cost of interacting and trading economically with the rest of the world were just much higher there than they were in Europe. And South Asia or Southeast Asia is another interesting case. Here again, tons of islands, peninsulas, maybe not as much as Europe, but a lot more than sub-Saharan Africa. Okay. Now, the way you could solve this problem is if you had really good rivers that went deep into the interior. And it turns out sub-Saharan Africa has some of the world's great rivers, huge, massive rivers. The problem with these rivers is almost all of them have huge waterfalls and cataracts along the way. So they've never been navigable. So going back to the time of the Egyptians could only go up the Nile a certain amount before they started hitting all these cataracts, and they couldn't go all the way to the source of the Nile, which is Lake Victoria in Uganda. They never even got close to there because of all these cataracts, meaning waterfalls. It's not just the Nile that suffers from this. The Zambezi River does. The Congo River does. So there are only stretches of navigability, but these great rivers that go deep into the continent can't easily get you to the coast. And one good illustration of this is the Congo. So the Congo is this incredible river. This is the Atlantic coast, and you can see it goes up through Kinshasa all the way around to Kisangani and then down to Lubumbashi. So this is an incredible river, but there are several major points of cataracts. So it's navigable from the Atlantic to Matadi, which is a city towards Kinshasa, and from there there's some rail transport to Kinshasa and whatnot, but you can't take a ship all the way in. And then again, from Kinshasa all the way to Kisangani, there's a navigable part of the river, but there are cataracts there which don't let you go all the way down to Lubumbashi, etc. So this increases trade costs a lot. Okay, and in part as a result of sub-Saharan Africa's size and also just the way countries were drawn, a large share of African population lives in countries with no outlet to the sea, no direct coastline and no river that gives them access to the sea. So about 28% of sub-Saharan Africa's population. And again, this is a lot higher than most other continents. Okay, any thoughts or comments on this transport issue? Okay, yeah, go ahead. Would what be? Oh, canals? I think in this day and age, they probably wouldn't invest. You're saying about the Congo in particular? All the landlocked countries have canals? I'm just not sure if it's what the cost would be, if it's feasible. I'm not sure. What you could imagine happening with, say, the Congo is if there was some way to create a canal around the cataracts. But part of the reason there are cataracts is there are these differences in altitude. So it's not as simple as like the Panama Canal, which is a difficult enough problem, or the Suez Canal. You'd have to have some elevation change. So I don't know. It'd be very difficult. What's going on right now in Congo is there's actually been some recent investment in rail infrastructure to get around the cataracts, and more of that investment is going in. So you could potentially unload containers in Matadi and then take them part of the way, reload them onto ships to get to Kisangani. But once you start pricing that in, it becomes very complicated. Multiple transit points. Okay, so a final geographic point, we mentioned this a little bit last time, is Africa's distance from the major markets. So again, for historical reasons, there was a lot of economic growth in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries in Western Europe and North America. Those regions of the world became by far the richest. They became politically dominant through an imperialistic sort of political strategy. But that's the downside. The upside is there are major markets to sell goods to. And if you think of the development of several what are now kind of upper middle income, well, actually Korea's a rich country now, Mexico's almost there. You can't really understand Mexican development without understanding the role that proximity to the U.S. played in its development, the access to the U.S. market. Similarly for Korea, proximity to the Japanese market was very important in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and even today. So proximity to a major market reduces the cost of trade and can have large benefits. Very few African countries are within striking distance of a rich market. So that's just a result of its geography in the world. Wow, that was depressing. Okay. So again, Bloom and Sachs talk about these fundamental geographic characteristics and how they affect kind of all realms of life, from agriculture to trade to health. What I want to focus in on and start making progress on and get us closer to thinking about kind of the econometrics of the problem is to talk about health factors. So health was one of their key factors, and it's something we're going to spend the next few weeks talking about. And it's a very important thing to discuss, given the high rate of tropical disease in sub-Saharan Africa. So the question I want to pose to you guys, when we, Bloom and Sachs go through and say, look, Africa's very poor, and we're making the case. Their point is Africa's poor because their agriculture isn't productive. Africa's poor because they have a lot of tropical disease. There's a flip side to all this, which is to say maybe Africa has lots of disease because they're poor as well. Maybe if they were richer, they'd do a better job of fighting all these tropical diseases. And in fact, the fact that over the last decade, as African growth has finally increased, we're seeing the first sustained reductions in malaria in decades, suggests that economic growth could be important in dealing with health problems. So this is a difficult problem. Health could affect wealth, wealth could affect health. How do we disentangle these things? We see rich parts of the world with good health on average, and we see poor parts of the world with bad health. How do we disentangle them? Now, there's a couple of different theories or stories we have in mind about what's causing poverty. One is that health just directly affects your labor productivity. So I think when Bloom and Sachs talk about tropical disease, what they have in mind is saying, in a place where people are getting malaria a lot, workers in those areas, these sick workers just aren't that productive. They're going to miss work a lot when they're at work. They're going to be ill. They're just not going to be able to focus. They're not going to be as strong. So they're going to earn less. So it's just a direct effect of health on low productivity to income. The flip side is what I was mentioning before. Maybe as my income rises, I consume more of everything, including more medicine, more nutritious food. I have more access to healthcare, more access to antimalarials, so I don't get sick. So these are both very plausible channels, and I think most people agree there's something to both of them. The question is figuring out which is most important. So what I want to do now is step back and say, okay, if we see a correlation between two variables, so here say income and health, or health and wealth, A and B, how do we interpret that correlation? So this is a general discussion. We're going to come back to these kinds of points throughout the term as we interpret data. So rich countries have good health, poor countries have bad health. What is causing what? How do I interpret this? There's at least 4 or 5 different logically consistent explanations. So one is A causes B. The reason there's this correlation in the data is when A increases, it causes B to increase. That's logically consistent. There's some causal impact of A on B. So this could be our story. Health causes wealth. This is like Bloom and Sachs. When I'm sick, I'm poor because I can't be productive. The flip side of this, which is also logically consistent, is B causes A. And in the case of our example, this would be wealth causes health. I'm better off so I can get better healthcare. If we're interested in the causal impact of health, economists would call this channel from B back to A endogeneity, or reverse causality. If we're thinking of income as the outcome, that's kind of cool. If we're thinking of income as the dependent variable, I don't want to say it again, then if income affects health, that's reverse causality. That's the reverse of the causality we're thinking of in our model. So for Bloom and Sachs, B causes A is endogeneity, or reverse causality. So just keep that name in mind. Okay. There's a third possibility, which is maybe both these things are going on at the same time. And I think for the most part, most people would say with the theories I put up on the board on the slide about health and wealth, most people think both have something to them. So A could cause B, B could cause A. In other words, these things could reinforce each other. And then it becomes even harder to sort things out. This would be called simultaneity. Does that make sense? These things are simultaneously affecting each other in both directions. Okay? So number 1 is our sort of theoretical causal effect. 2 is endogeneity. 3 is simultaneity. This is the language. This is like the jargon or the lingo we're going to be using throughout the term to discuss a lot of our data interpretation. I want you guys to learn this language so we can be on the same page. Okay. Number 4 is very important. Number 4 is maybe there's a third factor that both affects A and B. So yes, you see A and B moving together, but that's because they're both affected by C. So when C increases, it affects both A and B. This is something that applied economists and applied social scientists worry a lot about, and this is called omitted variables bias by economists. In statistics, in medical research, in a lot of other fields, they call this confounding. So there's a bit of a different language used. Why is C an omitted variable? It's the omitted variable because it's sort of outside our model. We were thinking of this in terms of A causing B, but outside of that causal model, there's this other variable, this omitted variable that matters a lot. Okay, so when we bring this to health and wealth, and we look across countries, the U.S. is healthy and wealthy, and Kenya is poor and unhealthy. What would be a good omitted variable? What's a possible omitted variable you might worry about? What's a possible C here? Yeah. Public policy. So maybe places with really good public policy invest in health, and they have good economic policy, and yeah, you become healthy and wealthy, but that's because you have very high capacity public servants. So C could be the quality of public policy. Yeah. So give an example of one. So slavery. So to the extent that slavery has long-term consequences on incomes and social norms and institutions and a whole range of things that we see today, maybe that historical event affects a whole wide range of outcomes. And yeah, they move together because places that were hit with this historical shock or trauma are affected in multiple ways. So give an example. maybe you're more prone to getting certain diseases from far away if you're close to a port, but you're also maybe, well, that's interesting. So that would be a sort of omitted variable that might make you wealthier through trade, but hurt your health. So that's a great example because there could be certain C's, omitted variables, that increase A and B, others that decrease A and B, or others that move them in opposite directions. Yeah. So how would education work? That's right. So if more educated people can earn more because they have more skill, but if more educated people just take better care of their health or they can figure out health problems better, you might see this kind of correlation. And it's actually very actively debated what the role of education is in affecting both health and income. That's a huge topic of research in applied economics. Okay, so yeah, last one. Okay, so foreign aid or foreign investment could raise income, but maybe that foreign aid targets the health sector in particular. Okay, so in basically 2 minutes, you guys came up with 5 very plausible C's. And if we thought for another 2 minutes, we'd have 5 more, 10 more. So the problem in a lot of data interpretation, the thing that people care about the most and worry about the most is number 4. Just because there's a concern that our social systems are so complicated, so many different things affect each other in different ways, that it's almost impossible to say, oh, I've ruled out all the confounders. I've ruled out all the omitted variables. That's a big concern. Okay, finally, a final possibility is whatever association we see in the data is just purely coincidental. There's 2 variables moving around out in the world, and they just happen to be correlated by chance. But this is the reason why we have p-values and confidence intervals, is precisely to get a sense of how likely it is, and that's really the definition of a p-value, how likely it is to see a correlation of a particular strength just by chance. So hopefully when we say something is statistically significant at 95% confidence, 99% confidence, then if it's at 99% confidence, then it's very unlikely to be due to chance. 1%, but it's due to chance. So we should probably think of it as a pretty serious relationship, even 95% confidence. So we're not so worried about number 5. Can people think of any other logically consistent stories other than these, or is this pretty comprehensive? Yeah. Right, so even more complex than C would be, maybe this factor doesn't directly affect A or directly affect B, but works through an even more complicated chain of causality. And we're going to come to an example of that in a couple seconds. So it may actually, there may be a couple steps in the chain before you get to A and B. Okay, great. So we're focused on number 1, though. That's our theory. That's Bloom and Sachs' theory. A lot of people care about this theory. If you improve health, can you make people richer? That's like a basic question in development. If you invest in health, will people be better off? We may care about health inherently, because when people are unhealthy, they suffer, they're miserable. But on top of that, we may care about it as an economic investment or as an economic policy. Okay, it gets even worse, guys. Even if we can establish that A causes B, we may not even know exactly why. We still may want to understand the mechanism. So if I'm healthier, and that makes me wealthier, is that because I have less absenteeism at work, or because I'm more productive for each hour I'm at work, or something else entirely? I don't know. There's different mechanisms at play. In particular, with this case, I'm going to talk about 2 theories from 2 very famous papers that both argue that there is a link between A and B, say tropical disease and development, but they're 2 totally different channels. And this has been this kind of heated debate for 15 years in development now. So theory 1 is Bloom and Sachs. Tropical disease lowers labor productivity, and that hurts incomes today. That's Bloom and Sachs' story in the article you read. The second theory is totally different in terms of the channel, but has the same kind of implication. And it comes back to what I mentioned before. It turns out historically, European imperialists, traders, explorers, missionaries, the whole gang that went around the world conquering the world, that tropical disease in Africa affected what they did in Africa. And in particular, it meant that they could only settle and set up permanent colonies and permanent settlements in certain areas. In areas where they couldn't set up permanent settlements, their total goal, their sort of ultimate goal, was just to extract resources. In other words, in areas with really bad tropical disease, Europeans went in and set up extractive systems, extractive economic systems. In areas where they could settle that were temperate, that had little disease, like many parts of North America, they settled, they colonized, and they set up somewhat more representative institutions. Now, there's like about 1 million caveats to this representative issue, not the least that Africans in North America couldn't, had no representation. They were slaves. Women couldn't vote. There's 1 million caveats, but there were at least the seeds of, let's say, more representative institutions. So this is an institutional argument. The first theory is Bloom and Sachs. The second theory is this very famous paper by Acemoglu, Johnson, and Robinson, 2001. So it's an economic history paper saying, yes, tropical disease matters for Africa, but not because of tropical disease today. It matters because it affected the patterns of European colonization 150, 200 years ago. Okay? So these extractive institutions may have facilitated the slave trade. These extractive institutions may have facilitated the extraction of minerals and rubber and various commodities, but ended up not treating people very well. And then it gets back to the point that was raised before. Public policy outcomes in places with these sorts of exploitative institutions may be very different than the public policy outcomes in places with more democratic institutions. That's their argument. Okay, clicker question. We haven't even talked about the theories yet, but I want to get your guys' kind of initial take. Just based on the 2-minute version of Bloom and Sachs, Acemoglu, Johnson, and Robinson, do you feel Bloom and Sachs is actually the more relevant theory linking health and development or income? Acemoglu, Johnson, Robinson, are they both kind of equally important, or actually does neither seem right to you? I have no idea on this slide. I feel like you guys are maybe warming up into the clickers. All right.